Welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Peter Counter, and I'm the editor-in-chief of FindBiometrics and Mobile ID World, which have recently returned from Money20 USA in Las Vegas. Our very own Doug OGorden was on the exhibition floor last week, speaking to the leaders in biometrics, identity verification, and authentication in the fintech space. That's why on this special episode of ID Talk, he interviews Chris Briggs, Vice President of Product Management at Mitek. Briggs showcases the fruits of Mitek's HooYu acquisition, which resulted in the new product MiVIP, as well as the company's latest multi-modal biometric authentication solution. The conversation turns to the fintech buzz at Money20 around privacy, verification, and authentication. Briggs weighs in on what it takes to stand out in the prolific identity verification landscape, and he offers his expert thoughts on the responsibility of the biometrics community when it comes to addressing skyrocketing fraud statistics, even referencing his own misfortune as the victim of SIM swapping fraud. It's a fascinating conversation with an active identity leader. So let's jump right in. Here is FindBiometrics' Doug OGorden in conversation with Mitek's Chris Briggs, recorded live at Money20.
Hi, FindBiometrics and Mobile ID World listeners. Doug OGorden here. I am live at Money20 2022.
Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. And I'm with Chris Briggs. He is the VP of Identity
for Mitek Systems.
For Mitek Systems. He got a promotion, I guess, or a new title, and it doesn't say that on his badge, so I'm confused. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
We saw each other a month or two ago, and we're doing it again.
At Identiverse, right?
Now we're talking money.
Now we are talking money.
So,
in a slightly different way. Although a lot of people are talking about money with economy and everything going on these days.
We're halfway through the show, or over halfway through. What are you showcasing at the show?
So we have a couple of things. We had an acquisition that we talked about earlier in the year, a company called HooYu based out of the UK. We have fully integrated their capabilities and rebranded what we're providing to the marketplace. We've launched a new product called MiVIP.
And that's only a month old.
It is very recent. And then effective this week, we launched a new product in the authentication space. It's a multi-modal biometric authentication that incorporates both face and voice biometrics with liveness, allowing us to be able to biometrically bind an identity to a device.
Nice. What are some of the buzzwords you caught at the show this year? Now that we're almost done with the show, I'm going to ask people this question in the next day and a half.
Yeah.
Well, any buzzwords on the show floor?
So I think a lot of what I'm seeing in this year, and not just us, but with other players in the market, you're seeing a lot about platforms. You're seeing a lot about deploying, whether it's a financial service as a platform or whether it's payments as a platform, which has been a trend that's sort of been emerging over time. But now as we go into the SaaS world, more and more of that kind of patterns with what we're seeing with MiVIP. I would also say some of the other things, it's a lot of topics, hot topics around privacy, fraud, authentication, verification, particularly because that's something that we pay attention to.
Sure. In 2021, we saw over $3 billion of venture capital injected into identity and remote onboarding in this space.
Yep.
The sector's exploded. There's lots of activity from the leaders and the challengers. What have you done to stand apart from the ID verification competition, and how are you evolving?
Yeah,
that's a really good question to ask Mitek.
Right?
I think. Go ahead.
So there's a couple of things that you're seeing in the market. So if you look across the market, a few years back, there weren't as many competitors. Now when you walk the floor here at Money20, you see a lot of different identity verification, authentication providers. They are all constantly evolving, not just from a product feature perspective, but also business models. New commercials, new way of selling, different ways of selling. And you're seeing that both, as you said, from current players as well as the challengers. So what are we doing? Well, we are reinventing the space around biometrics capabilities overall. we actually believe that the future in identity is not about a piece of plastic, but it's about a holistic identity, an individual. And that individual is made up of many different parts that represents how he or she is working in the economy. The other thing I would say is that you have to really track very closely with the emerging regulations and standards in the marketplace. So Mitek is very closely involved with many of the digital trust frameworks and ecosystems that are being built in various economies. There's not really a strong one in the United States market, it's more standards-based, but if you look to like Canada, where they have DIAC, or the UK, which has the IATF, we're very involved, particularly in the UK, around how those are evolving, both by developing new product features, but also contributing to this ecosystem and allowing consumers to be able to have direct access to these new capabilities.
Well, in the U.S., we have a digital identity bill sitting in the House right now, ready
Correct.
to be. But I think it's really basic. It's not the hard.
More like guidelines, right?
Correct.
This
It's
is how you
a
have to
starting
think about
point.
it. Right. Which I'm very much in favor of creating guidelines and standards in the American market because it's something that we need. Consumers need it as well.
Yeah. Fraud.
Big topic.
Fraud continues to be a driving factor for identity technology
Huge.
adoption in finance and banking.
Yeah.
A 2020 Javelin survey found that over 65% of fraud victims reported having a dissatisfied feeling after their fraud ticket had been resolved. 38% of those people canceled their bank accounts because of this. What are some of the most pressing fraud threats today? And how's your organization helping defend against those fraud threats?
Yeah, this one's pretty personal to me. I think we might have talked a little bit about this in our last interview, but I was actually personally one of those statistics, a victim of SIM swap.
Ooh.
And that was really what got me thinking about what is identity in this space and what can we do about it. Statistics are completely correct. What we're seeing is astronomical increase in ATO, account takeover, and some form of a synthetic ID. Over the last 3 to 4 years, it's grown by something in the neighborhood of over 300%.
Yeah.
So you're seeing this year over year continuous increase in both fraud incidents as well as the ability for fraudsters to find places in the digital ecosystem where they can find you as a consumer. What do we have to do as people like Mitek, or even I would argue as a community of verification providers? First of all, we have to keep the consumer in mind. At the end of the day, it's all about working with the consumer in an ethical,
Educating
privacy,
them. Yeah.
consent-driven framework so that they understand what opportunities are available for them to both secure their own identity as well as proliferate it in a way that continues to be curated in a very ethical manner, secure, with all of the things that you would need to be able to ensure that Chris Briggs is who he says he is, but at the same time keeping his identity safe.
Yeah. All right, my last question is my Q4 question. I've started to ask it. We do a research study annually. This year it's our 20th annual research study on identity and biometrics.
So Doug, have you been asking these for 20 years?
No, only a year.
Oh, okay.
But it was somebody else's job before this. This year, we're starting to work with a bigger marketing intelligence firm, Acuity Marketing Intelligence. And
Sure thing.
we're going to build the data. We're looking at vertical markets. We're diving into not the what happened last year review. We're going into what's the road ahead. So my question to you is, I'll pull out the crystal ball and ask you, what do you think Money20 is going to look like in 2023? What is next year? What do you think about next year for this industry?
In general, if you look at our client base, we think about 3 major drivers in the economy that are going to drive, well, they're going to be prolific in the way that companies are thinking about their business. The first is profitability. They're going to have to continue to make money in very uncertain times. In tandem with that, they have to maintain profitability by continuing to work with their customers in an effective way, giving a providing a great customer experience, because just like you said, if I'm a victim of fraud and I have a bad customer experience, I'm leaving it going to the next guy because there's 10 other players that are in the market.
Right.
So the focus on decreasing the friction, increasing the ability to create effective customer experience, especially in tandem with what's going on in the fraud. And then I actually do see tightening and more rigid implementation of regulations and standards, even more so than what we've seen today.
Yeah.
We'll see more around privacy. We'll see more around how data is handled, where data can go. One of the things that many of the vendors here are going to have to deal with is, okay, it's great that you have a product that allows you to create a platform for credit cards, but if you're entirely digital and you log on from one country and execute a transaction in a second country to get a product in a third country, what regulations apply to those types of scenarios? And it's only now that we're beginning to grapple with a fully digital view of the consumer. And that's going to rack people's brains. That doesn't even count going into the metaverse.
Right.
Building stuff.
Let's try to get it right here before we even talk about that.
Right.
Let's get our IDs correct in the physical world.
Before we don't. Yeah.
Well,
I think there will be a time and an age when physical IDs go away, but it's not anytime soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, what's the best way for our readers to get our listeners to get a hold of you and want to know more about Mitek?
Well, you can get information on our website, mytechsystems.com. Feel free to also LinkedIn with me, Chris Briggs. More than happy to have you reach out, ask questions. Last thing is we're going to be rolling out some additional sort of engagement strategies and talking to some of the consumers and some of the customers in the marketplace. We're running Ask Me Anything on Reddit. We have a number of other things that we're doing in the marketplace to really get this voice of reason about identity and biometrics and break up some of those mistruths about what's going on in the space to help advocate for consumers.
Awesome. Well, have a great Money 2020 and see you at the next show.
Yeah.
All right.
The next one.
Take care.
Thank you, sir.
And so concludes our interview with Chris Briggs, Vice President of Product Management at Mitek. Learn more about the topics discussed in this episode by visiting mytechsystems.com or clicking the links in the show notes. And for more financial ID tech news and interviews, stay posted to FindBiometrics and Mobile ID World. I want to thank Chris for participating in this episode, and thank you to Doug OGorden for conducting the interview. Our podcast theme music is by Logomrad. I have been your host, Peter Counter. Thank you for listening to the ID Talk podcast.